Everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us today for creating a visual history project. This is part of a series of workshops to help students prepare for New York City History Day. My name is Sonia Oxhorn. I am an educator here at the Center for Brooklyn History. So the Center for Brooklyn History preserves, protects, and shares Brooklyn's history with the borough's diverse audiences and beyond. The Center for Brooklyn History is a result of a 2020 merger between the Brooklyn Historical Society and the Brooklyn Public Library's Brooklyn Collection. As part of the Brooklyn Public Library, it is the most expansive collection of Brooklyn history in the world. CBH has hosted New York City History Day since 2021. New York City History Day is the regional contest for National History Day, a program that provides over 500,000 students each year the opportunity to excel at historical research, interpretation, and creative expression. This year, the competition will be held hybrid, and top entries from the regional contest will be invited to advance to state and national contests. So today's objectives are to understand how to choose effective images to help tell your story, to explore how an image can make your project more engaging, and to learn how to find some of these images for history projects. So just to kind of give us something to work with, today we're going to be thinking a little bit about the Brooklyn Bridge, just as an example, but you can use any of these skills that we're going to talk about for any topic that you choose. So if you're making a documentary, an exhibit, or a website, incorporating images into your project is just as important as writing. People tend to look at images before they're going to read the text. So it's going to be the images that are going to grab their attention and make them want to know more. So finding these images is part of the research process, and it takes time to learn how to read an image, just like it takes time to learn how to read a historic document. So the first thing we're going to start off today is we're going to look at this image on the right, and just think about, what do you see? So you can write in the chat anything that you're noticing when you look at this picture. I'll give us just a few moments to take it in. There's a lot to look at. Oh, it says the chat is disabled. I'm sorry about that. Let's fix that. Should be fixed now. So we're saying that it looks like a family in the foreground, or what looks like a family in the foreground. Great. What else are we noticing? What do we see? So another question you could ask is who? So who are these people and what was the occasion of the crossing? Absolutely. right? So as we're looking, we're thinking of even more questions. Give us one more minute to take a look. So why are they dressed so fancy? They definitely look fancy to me. And we're thinking that this is a time period when men and women wore hats. And that might be also adding to them looking kind of fancy to us. So absolutely. So we're noticing the people are dressed differently. They're walking somewhere. We're wondering why they're walking, who they are, if they're related to each other. And so we've already begun to ask this, right? What other questions does taking a look at this image make us think of? So what else are we considering when we look just at this image? So then my last question about this image is, does it tell a story? Right? So even if we don't know very much about it, does it tell a story? And what is it telling to us? What is it saying to us when we look at it? So when you're looking at images and you're choosing which images to put into your project, some questions you might want to think to yourself is, can I answer any of these questions that I'm thinking of when I look at the image, right? Is there a way to get the answers to those questions? Because if you're having questions about an image, it's very likely that your audience is going to have the same questions. And when you're choosing an image, you really want to think about what it says to that audience. So, right, looking at these images is part of the story that you're telling when you're presenting your History Day project. And so when you're looking at an image, you have to think, is this part of the story I want to tell? Right? There are so many different things that we can say about the Brooklyn Bridge, and you have to ask yourself, is this image part of that story? Does it relate to what the rest of my research is about? Does it give context to my historical perspective? So now I'm going to ask us to participate a little bit more. So I'm going to give us the sentence: the Brooklyn Bridge opened to the public on May 24th, 1883. And I'm going to give you two images, and I want us to pick which image we would put with this sentence. So I'm going to open a poll, and I'll show us image A. So the Brooklyn Bridge opened to the public on May 24th, 1883. This is image A. Now I'll show us image B. There's some context next to them. And now I want us to vote in the poll on if you would choose image A or image B to go along with the sentence, the Brooklyn Bridge opened to the public on May 24th, 1883. Okay, so 100% of us are saying image A. So the one on the left with the black and white drawing. Does anyone want to write in the chat about why you picked image A? It looks festive. It looks more relevant to the time period. Absolutely. So the first image was a drawing that appeared in Harper's Weekly magazine on June 2nd of 1883. So shortly after the Brooklyn Bridge opened. And the man standing in the middle is President Arthur, who walked across the bridge on the first day. The image B, the image on the right, is taken on May 24th of 1983, so 100 years after the bridge was built. So it's celebrating that anniversary of it opening, but it didn't happen at that time period. Yeah, so we're saying that the black and white makes it look more like the time period, and the color makes it look very modern. Absolutely. Okay. So let's try it one more time. The Brooklyn Bridge was the first suspension bridge to use bundled cables. It took workers several months to tie them all together. So sometimes we also want to think about the context, but we also want to think about whether an image is visually kind of interesting. So this is image A. To go along with the Brooklyn Bridge was the first suspension bridge to use bundled cables. It took workers several months to tie them together. And here's image B. And I opened up the new poll, so you can select if you would go with image A or image B. All right, so this time we're more split. Some of us are saying image A, and a few more of us are saying image B, the one on the right. So it's not quite 100% this time. And I think, right, that really shows that people are looking at different things and find interest in different things. And so some of what we have to look for is to really give it more context, right? I'm just giving you one short sentence, so it would be difficult to pick which one to use, but does anyone want to write in the chat why they picked A or B? So there's more workers in image B, so it gives it sort of more to look at, and found it easier to understand what was happening in B due to the difference in perspectives. I agree with that. I think image A is a really cool photograph and kind of an interesting piece of a historical document, but if you were just to look at it, it would be a little difficult to understand what's happening. Whereas image B, which is an illustration, is really clear. Absolutely. All right. So when you're looking at images, we want to describe our image oftentimes, right? If we were looking back at these ones, right? Image A, if you did end up using it, you would need to kind of describe what was happening a little bit more. And that's okay. So when you're describing your image, though, you really want to make sure that you're setting the scene for whoever's taking a look. And this will be especially important if you are working on a documentary. And so you have that ability to kind of do a voiceover. So you want to think about, what is the environment in the image? Is it inside, outside, day, night, sunny, cloudy? So, with this image, I would say that it's outside on maybe a cloudy day. You want to think about what the major features of the image are. So what's in the foreground or the front of the image, what's in the background, what's in the middle. So in this image, there's a man suspended on a swing. He's hanging from a cable that's attached to one tower of the Brooklyn Bridge. And you can see buildings in the background as well as scaffolding. And if you look really closely, you can see a crowd of people that are watching this man. And then you want to think about how the different pieces of the image are connected. So I can tell you from doing research that the man in this drawing is master mechanic E.F. Farrington, who was chosen to be pulled along the newly stretched steel wire to ensure that it was safe for other workers. And about 10,000 people came to watch as he crossed from one side of the bridge to the other for the very first time. You want to be creative, and you can use your imagination to help tell a fuller picture. So you might want to think about what might this picture sound like if you were there? What might it smell like? What might you feel? Or how would you feel? So you could say, you know, the onlookers were cheering as E.F. Farrington became the first person to cross the bridge. And he was egging them on as he waved his hat in the air. So you want to really set the scene and let your audience have a better understanding of what's going on in the image and why it is that you chose to use it. And then you can give more context, right? Not everything is going to be said in the image. And so you can tell them what else you know about the image. So I've told you who this man is. I've told you what his task is. So that might not be so obvious just from looking at the image, but it's still important to kind of see it because maybe it's easier to understand what I'm saying as you're looking at the image. And that's, you know, why having images attached is important to your research project. It gives a more complete picture. And then, you know, you might want to include why the image was created in the first place, or maybe why it was preserved. So this was an image that was created for the Brooklyn Daily Eagle, which was a local newspaper. And it would have likely been published around the time that Farrington crossed the wire. So it was reporting the news of the day. And then other information that you might want to mention, depending on what it is you're talking about, is who made the image, where did it come from, what's the historic context, what else might you need to know to fully understand the image, and maybe what is more difficult to see that's important. So if you look at the tower of the bridge in the corner, you can see that there are some people standing sort of halfway along the bridge tower. And those are that, you know, 10,000 people who came to watch. And it's maybe not so obvious to see it, but that is part of setting the scene. So now I want us to try and find our own image. So I'm going to ask that you go to the Library of Congress website, loc.gov. And when you go there, there will be a drop-down menu near the top that says everything. And if you click on that and go to photos, prints, drawings, I want you to find an image to go along with the following sentence. When the Brooklyn Bridge was built, it was the longest suspension bridge in the world, 20% longer than any other bridge. And then I've made a Padlet, and I want you to add your image to the Padlet so that we can see all the options that we might have come across. So this is what the Library of Congress homepage looks like. Where that purple circle is, that's the drop-down menu that says everything. So if you click on everything, go to photos, prints, and drawings, and then you can search for whatever you want to try and find an image that goes along with when the Brooklyn Bridge was built. It was the longest suspension bridge in the world, 20% longer than any other bridge. So here is that sentence. The Padlet, I will put the link to that in the chat to make it easier. So there is the Padlet link. You can go to loc.gov, and that will bring you to the Library of Congress. So let's spend like 5-10 minutes just working on our own to try and find an image that you would use to go along with this sentence if you were creating a documentary or an exhibit or putting it on a website. So I will have the Padlet open, and if you go to the Padlet, you'll also have the instructions written there. And then if you've never used Padlet before, after you go to the Library of Congress, you're just going to want to copy the link and then press this little kind of reddish pink plus sign at the bottom, and you can just add, either you can click this orange link and copy and paste it there, or you can just even put it into the chat and we can find it. So I'll stop talking now and give you like 5 minutes to try and find an image. These are looking really good. And I like that we have kind of a wide range of what we might use for this sentence. The Library of Congress is a great resource for anything relating, especially to American history. They have, documents, audio clips, video clips, images, paintings, photographs, drawings, newspaper articles. They have so much that's available. Any of the libraries in New York City are also really great places to look for images. And depending on what your topic is, you can also look up a museum that might specialize in something relating to your topic. And most museums, especially the ones around here, will have at least some of their archives and collections digitized, so that you can have access to those images as well. When you're making your projects, you just want to make sure that you're citing everything correctly. And National History Day asks that we use either MLA or Chicago format. So as long as you're giving proper credit to those images, because this is something for educational purposes and you're not making money off of it, you can use any image that you want. You don't have to worry about, copyright and things like that. So cite it correctly and don't try and sell your work afterward. And you're fine to use any image from a library's collection, a museum's collection, a newspaper, anything like that. So these are really great ones, and I'm glad we all kind of together got a chance to look through the Library of Congress, see a little bit how it works, and start to understand, what a search term might be. So we're still adding to that, which is great, coming up with other options. So our sentence was, when the Brooklyn Bridge was built, it was the longest suspension bridge in the world, 20% longer than any other bridge. And we're getting images that are kind of showing the bridge stretching across the river. We have some that show it under construction to kind of give a sense of its scale and how big it is. We have images that are looking at it as if you were about to kind of start walking down the bridge at the time when there were streetcars that went across it. You can see the streetcars stretching into the distance, which really, that one gives a really nice sense of scale. We have a painting or some sort of charcoal drawing maybe of the bridge, showing it up against the city. So all of these are great options, and depending on then, what else you're saying or what you're going to go on to next, you might want to choose any one of these. All right, I'm going to close the Padlet, but you're welcome to return to it anytime. And we'll go back to our presentation. Okay, so now I want to talk a little more specifically about History Day projects. And at the end of all of this, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'll definitely leave us time at the end for some Q&A. So I'm going to show us just the beginning clips of some History Day documentaries. So these are ones that have won at nationals in the past. And as you're watching them, I want you to just think about what made the documentaries engaging, what made you pay attention to them, and what did you know or learn within the first just minute of watching them. So I have 3 examples that I'm going to show us, and I'm really just going to show like a minute from each one, just to give us a sense of how you might start a History Day documentary. All right.
I think that when you learn about other groups, you gain a wealth of information about the people around you.
In the spring of 1969, students at UC Berkeley staged a campus-wide strike, demanding the formation of a College of Ethnic Studies. The conflict between students and administrators generated a conversation around curriculum inclusivity that captivated the university for several months. After much negotiation, the 2 sides compromised to form a Department of Ethnic Studies under administrative control. Since 1969, the Ethnic Studies Department at Berkeley has grown into the largest degree-granting program in the country. Beyond Berkeley, the modern spread of ethnic studies into high school curricula serves as a testament to the power of conflict and compromise to drive positive change, revolutionizing how we study the past.
So just, a minute of that, and we're thinking about what made this engaging, what made you pay attention, and what you learned within just the first minute. Now we're going to go on to our second documentary.
I want history to remember me. Not that I was the first Black woman to be elected to the Congress, not as the first Black woman to have made a bid for the presidency of the United States, but as a Black woman who lived in the 20th century and who dared to be herself. I want to be remembered as a catalyst for change in America.
Throughout her career, Shirley Chisholm used her skills in debate and diplomacy to be a catalyst for change. She is famous for being the first in many political arenas.
In daring to be her full self, she opened the door for many to follow. But what she really wanted to be remembered for is catalyzing real change for others. This is the story of one of those changes which has impacted millions of Americans.
It is the story of how Shirley Chisholm used debate and diplomacy to win, for the first time in U.S. history, a minimum wage for domestic workers such as housekeepers and nannies. It is a story filled with successes, failures, and consequences that shows there is still work to be done to carry on Chisholm's legacy and to keep undoing the legacies of racism and sexism in U.S. labor laws.
It is a story with one wild plot twist involving a man that Martin Luther King called the most dangerous racist in America. And it is, in the end, a story of why representation matters.
Shirley Chisholm was born in Brooklyn in 1924 to a working class.
All right, and here is our last clip.
Stop the bombing. Let us save our national honor. Stop the bombing and stop the war. Let us save American lives and Vietnamese lives. Let us take a single instantaneous step to the peace table. Stop the bombing.
What is the difference in the opinion of your group and that one across the street?
Well, about as much difference as day and night. They believe the war in Vietnam is immoral and inhuman, and we believe it's essential to defend our freedom and to keep our word and our commitments.
While clergy throughout the United States debated American involvement in Vietnam, military chaplains serving in the war faced challenges of their own, balancing the often conflicting roles of religious leader and soldier while steadfastly maintaining their religious beliefs. In 1775, the Continental Congress established the Chaplain Corps, ensuring religious freedom and support for soldiers in the Army. From the Revolutionary War to the World Wars, Korea to Iraq, chaplains have played an essential and unique role in the military throughout American history, providing personal and pastoral care to soldiers in both times of peace and war. By the peak of the Vietnam War in 1968, nearly 2,000 Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish clergy volunteered to serve their country. Although endorsed by their particular religious institutions, chaplains served those of all faiths. They received military training through chaplain school, solidifying their role not only as religious leaders, but also as military officers.
Okay, so I want to be conscious of time and also make sure we leave enough time for some questions. But just, think about what, I'll go back to the last slide, right? What made these engaging? And we just watched a minute of each one, but what do you think made these documentaries engaging? What made you pay attention? And what did you know within just the first minute of watching? So the first one we watched won first place senior group documentary. The Shirley Chisholm documentary, that one is from New York City school kids, and that one won second place in junior group documentary last year. And then the third one we watched, it won first place in senior individual documentary. So these are all really great examples of documentaries that win at New York City or New York State or National History Day.
I think that when you learn about other groups,
Stop the
you gain.
There we go. These are also some examples of exhibit boards. For the past few years, everything for History Day has been online. But this year, New York City is going to be hybrid, and the state and national contests are going to be fully in person. So for New York City, that means that the documentaries, the websites, and the papers categories will all be judged virtually. Because the kind of format doesn't really change if they're online or in person. But the exhibits and the performances will be judged in person. So we're going back to a format of 3-dimensional exhibit boards. So as you're thinking about what kind of images you want, what kind of visuals you want, think about what that's going to look like in 3 dimensions. So here are some examples again of some winning projects from past years. So the one on the left is about the Great Chicago Fire and kind of rebuilding the city. The one on the right is about Tupperware parties and how they opened economics pathways for women. Here we have a project called Black Studies Now, Philadelphia's 1967 student walkouts. And in the center and on the right, we have some close-ups. So you can see how they really laid it out and used 3-dimensional objects. They have an iPad so that they can include a video. So you can use sort of sculptural objects. You can glue things to the presentation board. There's lots of different ways that you can present your exhibit boards. So some things to think about when creating an effective visual project. You want to use a wide variety of visual sources. So audio, video, interviews, photos, paintings, etc. Again, if you're doing a exhibit board, you can even kind of think about 3D, so sculptural objects. You want to think about how the visuals help tell the stories. So they're not there just because you need something to fill up space. You want them to directly relate to what you're saying and add even more context. You want to match the structure and the design with the content. So if your project is about something really sad or maybe heavy, you don't want like upbeat music playing in the background. If your project is about a major accomplishment though, you might want to include some sparkle or brighter colors to kind of visually clue the audience to the emotion behind the historic context. You want it to sound and look as professional as possible. And we know that, we don't all have kind of professional equipment, but you want to try and use as high-res images as you can, get clear recordings when you can, so you can really understand the language, and consider including captions if the audio clip is kind of difficult to hear, or an image description if there's like really a particular piece of the image you want to bring attention to. You want to grab the audience's attention and engage your emotions. And if you do all these other things that I just listed, your project will be attention grabbing and engaging. You want to rely on more than one sense. You want to make the project about more than just facts and really play into people's emotions so that they care about what you're talking about. And if you're passionate about it, show that passion, and people will feel that in the work you've done and will respond more to it. And then finally, you want to make sure your project is really clearly structured around your research and your thesis statement. So the research and the questions you're asking and answering are overall the most important parts of your history project. So if your project looks great, but it has no substance to it, it's not going to go very far. So you want to make sure that, all the pieces kind of come together and match, but you really want to make sure that all of them always come back to like, what is my essential question? How does this answer my thesis? Okay, so does anyone have any questions? Feel free to put them in the chat. They can be about something we talked about today, or something just relating to History Day in general. Happy to answer them, or my colleague Nat can answer them as well. And tomorrow we will be sending out a survey, just so that we can get some feedback on our workshops. And if you're a teacher and you are looking to get CTLE credit, then you have to fill out the survey in order to receive that credit. But along with that, we will also be sending out a handout, which kind of goes over some of the tips and tricks we talked about today and goes a little more in depth on how to create a visual project. So in the chat, I'm seeing, are Brooklyn History Center pictures available and searchable like Library of Congress? Absolutely. It's a little bit difficult to kind of search through right now. Nat just put in the chat the Brooklyn Library's digital collections. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the Brooklyn Library and the Brooklyn Historical Society recently merged to create the Center for Brooklyn History. And so our digital archives also are merging, and that process is not complete yet. So everything is there. It just sometimes you have to look in two different places. And I can show you what that looks like. Just to give you a sort of an idea. We also have videos already available on our website about how to use our collection. So this is where you would go if you were just getting the Brooklyn Public Library's digital collection, and you can search for whatever topic you want. I'll use the Brooklyn Bridge again, and it comes up with all of these different images. We also, you can look here, which is the Center for Brooklyn History specific collection. And you can go, you see arts and artifacts, photographs, advanced search, keyword search. So if we go to keyword search, we can look for images, items with images only, and do a search for the Brooklyn Bridge again. Lots and lots of things come up. You might want to include some quotation marks, so that really limits it just to things that are about the Brooklyn Bridge specifically. So absolutely, Brooklyn Historic and the Brooklyn Public Library's collections are available online, as are the Queens Public Library and the New York Public Library. All of them have digital collections available. So those are really great places to look, particularly if your project is about New York City or Brooklyn history. Any other questions? Feel free to put them in the chat. Can students use oral histories? Absolutely. Oral histories are a great way to add kind of a personal touch to history projects. So I know that the Center for Brooklyn History has a lot of oral histories available, and you can use those, as if they were like the talking parts that the students are doing over images. You can create your own oral histories if you know someone who relates to your project, or you find someone who relates to your project. You can record your own oral histories and ask them questions and really get that first person perspective. That's a great way to add some of that emotion into your projects. Right, hearing from the people who experience something themselves can be really, really powerful. And Nat also put the Brooklyn History's oral history link in the chat if you want to take a look at that. So when you're creating your projects, especially for the documentary, website, and exhibit categories, which are kind of more visual, you also want to think about, how do I include video clips or audio clips? How do I make the audience, feel what the people at the time might have been feeling? How do I get them to kind of sense what it might have felt like to be there, or what it would have smelled like, right? You can guess what New York City might have smelled like when they were doing all this construction, or what it would have sounded like. It would not have been very quiet. So you want to, add that in, really get people in the perspective of what it would have been like to be there. So we have one more workshop coming up for helping create History Day projects. Our next workshop is on November 15th, and it will be in person in Fort Greene at the Irondale Ensemble's theater. And so we are partnering with Irondale Ensemble to discuss how to create a performance. So how to create a historical performance. So if you are interested, or if you're a teacher who's interested in helping your students learn how to take historical research and make that into a scripted performance for a History Day project, please join us. The workshop will be from 4:15 to 5:45. So we'll have a full hour and a half to really work with the artists at Irondale and learn about their process, and then create a short performance ourselves, just to kind of get a sense of how you would do that. So you can use the QR code at the bottom if you want to sign up for that, or we'll send that link out tomorrow in the email as well. And then for History Day, registration is coming up very quickly. Teacher and homeschool parents pre-registration opens on November 14th. And I always want to remind people that teachers have to register before their students do. So that's why we're giving you a full month of pre-registration. General registration for teachers, parents, and judges will open December 12th. And then registration will close on January 23rd. And when registration closes, all written materials are due for all of the projects. So the annotated bibliographies, the process papers, and the cover pages for every project will be due on ZFairs on January 23rd. And papers, websites, and documentaries, those categories that are being judged virtually, those are due as well. The in-person contest will take place at the Brooklyn Public Library Central Branch on February 12th. And that'll be for the exhibit and documentary categories. So if you plan on creating an exhibit or a documentary, a performance, that's a typo, an exhibit or a performance, make sure you are saving that February 12th date so that you can make sure you are there to present your project. If you have any other questions about anything we talked about today, anything related to History Day, please get in touch with us. You can contact us at nychd@bklynlibrary.org. So feel free to email us any questions anytime. We are more than happy to help. And we are also available to teachers if you want to talk about how to incorporate History Day into your curriculum, and we can even send an educator into your classroom to work with your students on a specific piece of the kind of History Day project creation. So thank you all so much for joining us. We will send out that email tomorrow, and this video will go on YouTube soon, so you can watch it again if you missed any part of it. So thank you so much.